We were supposed to be unbreakable. But the truth was, we were already fractured beyond repair. Suling's declaration hit me like a sledgehammer. There was no going back from this. Every word she spoke was a nail in the coffin of our love, sealing a fate I had never imagined. As I stood there, the weight of her betrayal crashing down, I knew one thing. This wasn't just the end of our story. It was the beginning of a nightmare. The ties that bind. Some talks catch you off guard, and as Alana and I drove to meet Suling and Fen, we were about to have one of those talks. Alana needed to know that I had informed David that she would take over if I needed to step away for a bit. This meant that in the coming weeks we would carefully go over everything together so she could understand the path I was planning for the company and its projects. I also had to tell her that I made a will leaving everything to her in case something unexpected happened. Change was in the air, and the unknown was drawing closer. When she asked why I had made those plans, I told her that I wanted to make sure none of my father's family could claim anything from me if I moved on to another part of my life. That means they would have to know you exist, Alana said, and that you have made it to America. I can't be sure they don't know, even if I believe the U.S. government has worked hard to keep my identity secret, I replied. There's no way to know what the Chinese government has decided my father's family should know. They tend to keep things tightly controlled. Most people in China don't get the full picture. The media there is very limited, and social media supports only certain ideas. If something doesn't fit with the government's view, it won't be shown in the mass media. Those who speak out for freedom often disappear from public view. That single choice can end their work and change their way of life forever. I firmly believed that the Chinese government would protect its powerful figures from any criticism. The information my father left could reveal many respected political leaders and their business ties. It could point to former high-level officials who, because of their age, were now in top positions, along with those they had guided. I was the only one who knew how damaging this information could be. Many of these individuals were linked to organizations involved in military and scientific work and collaborated directly with government agencies. When the truth finally surfaced, people would struggle to understand the new reality, as these leaders had always shown a very different public image. The way society viewed many of these respected figures would change forever once the information was revealed. Most people would find it hard to accept the new truth because they were used to seeing things in a certain way. In many investigations, when the truth finally comes out, those who are in trouble often choose to cooperate in hopes of getting a lighter sentence. The connections made long ago would lead to others becoming tangled in a growing web of lies. Many people who faced consequences would claim they didn't know who would use the information they shared. This was partly true, as their assigned contacts were often familiar faces, but the impact still affected them. The Chinese government carefully looked at different things when trying to influence others, especially their weaknesses and motivations. They understood from experience that these factors could be powerful, as most people kept secrets they'd protect at any cost. They studied individuals to find out who mattered to them, as some of the most useful informants were those trying to protect the secrets of loved ones. With the world watching because of the upcoming Olympics, the Chinese government was ready to operate at their best. They prepared themselves for any disruptions to the image they wanted to show. Every foreign resident would be contacted for useful insights. Any electronic devices brought into the country would be watched for information. Many people from free countries could unknowingly share sensitive details through casual chats, letters, or emails to family in China, all of which were examined for anything that could be used against them. It is important to understand that the Chinese political party often created false images to hide the truth. Few recognized the lengths they went to in order to silence the growing Christian movement after major events, as these stories often disappeared from the news. Issues became less important, with focus shifting to the narratives promoted in mass media. Those who questioned the system in China often found themselves pushed aside. Information that spread usually did so through conversations and was hard to confirm. The Chinese government would often dismiss such information, claiming it wasn't true, and using slander to weaken the credibility of those speaking out, which helped reduce any possible damage. Without solid evidence, there was little the world could do. A few years ago, information leaked to an international group of lawmakers studying connections with China showed that over 1 million members of the Chinese Communist Party were working within the United States government. Another 500,000 were linked to American companies. Most were eventually found to hold positions where they could have a great influence. Those who knew about the situation felt uneasy, seeing how much of the free world was at risk. Members of the Chinese Communist Party promised to support communist ideas for their whole lives. From a young age, they learned to put the state first, showing loyalty by following orders without question and reporting any information that could harm the party's image. It was known that some workers at the U.S. consulate in Shanghai were identified and were always being watched. Many of them had family in China, which could put them in danger if they did not comply. Most observers agreed that CCP members should not be in U.S. government buildings and that the report should have been a serious alert to lawmakers in Washington, who seemed too lenient towards China. However, due to specific laws they had made, it was nearly impossible to handle this situation properly. When false information spreads, the truth can often turn into a conspiracy. It is troubling when a government looks into its own actions. A new president could try to fix this by putting some individuals on leave without pay during their time in office, leaving their fate to the next president. While they couldn't be fully dismissed, they could be kept in a state of uncertainty, which often happens in politics. This approach was similar to the lack of action seen over the years regarding illegal immigration, a topic discussed often in Congress, yet little was ever done. The lack of enforcement led many who entered the country illegally to think that U.S. laws were not serious. Without steady enforcement, people likely believe that nothing will change. The strong public reaction from opponents would have made things tough for any new president right from the start. One clear example of this was seen in America, with a man who was labeled a traitor by one political party just for leaving it. This served as a warning to all CCP members. If the Chinese Communist Party could sway political opinions in the free world to affect a president, imagine how much power they could have with a more direct approach. After all, only one person stood up to Communist China, and look at what happened to him. Even if the CCP was not involved, their members would think they were. Only after things went wrong did social media pretend to take stronger action, but those in the know understood it was just an act. The companies knew well who had the real power over the data in their systems and how easily their operations could be disrupted. Most of the software they used had originally been bought from China. To ensure their control, one group had become so strict that they seemed like the enforcers of social media rules. They limited voices that did not match their approved views, leaving some to wonder if they were following orders from Chinese leaders. Either way, their actions suggested that the divisive messages they pushed were acceptable, and perhaps they were in line with what those leaders wanted. One must consider how much these groups had changed their rules to soften their true aims. Were they the reason their members could not be removed from their positions? The Chinese Communist Party had long been skilled at influencing situations from the background. In recent years, a new movement was forming in North America, trying to push their agenda while discouraging independent thinking. Even though they used some of the same methods as the Chinese government, I believed it would not last because they could not control all mass media. The signs were already appearing that their influence was fading. Starting a political system required changing education, where new leaders began shaping the thoughts of the young. By influencing young minds who have few opinions of their own, they hoped to create a future that lacked diversity in thought. They began by telling them what to believe, instead of teaching them how to think critically. Alana took the news about my will better than I had expected. She was surprised to find out she was the main beneficiary. "I never knew," Alana said after I explained everything. "It seems like you focus on simplifying your life and the world around you. Many people say they care about the environment, but do little to actually help. You show your commitment through your actions instead of loud speeches. You lead by example." "You're right," I replied. "I learned that all living things are connected. The survival of one species often depends on others. For example, if fish populations decline, it can harm marine animals and upset the whole food web. Everything in nature is linked, and many people may never understand this idea." With this in mind, I have been working on making life better for everyone who shares this space while keeping things balanced. In our social studies class, we talked about inventions that could have really helped people but were hidden away because they might have affected money-making, Alana said. It makes me think about what the world would be like without greed. The wise people from the past thought about how many people there would be if no one ever died, and how much land there would be if there were no big disasters, I explained. They believed there would be enough land for everyone to live on and grow food. Alana looked at me with deep thoughts, but I felt she didn't quite get it, so I added, some believe the planet had better weather before big floods. The air might have been different then, creating a more stable environment. People could have learned to grow plants in a way that worked well with nature, Alana said. It's interesting how our actions have often made things more complicated instead of easier. I think I need to think more about my choices to fit these ideas. You're starting to understand how our choices matter, I said, and see the real effects of them. I try to work with nature and value what it gives us. I find great happiness in looking out at what will be our home and seeing the beauty of nature coming back to the valley. Every day I notice new plants and animals that I haven't seen here before. To me, that shows nature is happy. One of the goals we have is to make sure all power and communication lines are underground. This is better for the environment and lasts much longer than those exposed to weather. The village's lights for safety will have 2 LED lights on each pole pointing in different ways. This will reduce their impact and allow them to be spaced further apart. People often forget to appreciate what nature provides. How did you get David to agree with this idea? Alana asked. You know he sometimes needs some convincing to accept new things. I found out that my home and his are about the same size, I explained. So I asked him to show me his utility bill to compare it with mine. Even with our extra use for heating, our bill was lower. It took seeing the difference for him to understand why this is a good way to go. As I mentioned, we are starting to plan some new neighborhoods above the iron ore mine. I have set aside the plots where Suling and Fern's home will be built. Both of them will enjoy how big it is and the view of the whole valley it offers. I saw a smile grow on Alana's face. I think she could feel that I was starting to warm up to the idea of Suling and her possibly becoming close. We had decided to meet Suling and Fen at Fen's father's restaurant because they needed to tell me what was happening in their lives. I was curious if we could find a connection between Fen's brother and the new students at Alana's and Fen's school. On the drive there, we heard on the radio that the rumored trip of the Zen masters to America might be delayed because one of them was not well. I briefly wondered if this was a trick to get me back to the monastery. How can that be? Alana said after hearing the news. No one knows for sure, and those with information aren't saying anything. I think someone does, I replied. It makes me think about why they announced this just as I'm about to go to the state capitol for my yearly meeting with the governor and a leader from the EPA. The quiet that followed was heavy until Alana said, "It feels like things are tightening around us." Small matters can take on new meanings when you see the world clearly, not just the everyday disguise many of us follow. Most people go through their days without much thought. They follow their routines and worry more about finishing their work than anything else, I explained. That's why it's easy for the Chinese Communist Party to shape how most people think. When they control what people see and hear, it twists their understanding of the truth. The Chinese government knows human behavior better than anyone else because they teach children what to believe before they can fully understand life. They look for any change in how people act and try to squash any uniqueness before it develops. After all, it's important for everyone to fit into the system. Zai wei ji zhong hang zu shi, bi shu ju yi zi ji de jilao bu, I said without thinking in Chinese. What does that mean? Alana asked. One must be careful when walking in the unknown, I replied. I added, my adopted father used to say that to me when we were trying new things because my excitement sometimes got the best of me. Those moments were rare, but they gave me a taste of freedom. Dirk, every time we are together, I learn from you, Alana said. Not just from what you say, but from how you see things. We often take so much for granted that you help me see should be appreciated. It made me appreciate what we have in America and understand why we need to protect it. Freedom is hard to gain, especially if you've never had it. It can feel like a faraway dream, I explained. For years, I wondered what it would be like, and I'm still amazed at what it lets me do. We see people from China visiting places around the world, just like those from free nations. Don't forget that these people have shown their loyalty and earned the freedoms that come with it. Suling was excited to tell Alana and Dirk some good news. The civil judge had approved her name change, and now all her government documents matched. She was officially Suling Che Wuming, a name she felt proud to carry. Her father had gotten emotional when she told him about her new name because he understood its importance to her. She hoped she could live up to what it meant. From the first day he found her by the hidden pond, Wuming watched over her, helping her navigate the difficulties in her life. She had been struggling with outside pressures, trying to control her choices. She didn't understand why she felt trapped at her uncle's house. Initially, she thought Wuming was much older, only to find out they were just a year apart. She realized she didn't belong there, and he seemed to see that too. Instead of scolding her, he suggested keeping their meetings a secret and promised not to tell anyone about them. She agreed, and that was the start of their friendship. Slowly and without any pressure, he shared his thoughts and guided her to discover important truths herself. It took her time to see that he had not had a normal childhood, which gave him a different view on life. For nearly a year, they enjoyed this secret friendship until she found out that her friend was known as Wuming, a name she had often heard in her uncle's house, especially since the authorities were often looking for him. She couldn't understand why someone her age was so important to the Chinese authorities, but she knew she had to keep it a secret. One of her favorite memories was when they accidentally broke a small branch from a fern that had a cocoon on it. He carefully picked it up and looked for a way to fix it. She watched closely as he made a small cut in the stem and placed the broken part back in, hoping it would heal. They checked on it every day until they were sure it was growing again. When she asked him why he went through all that trouble, he said that everything deserves a chance to thrive. The cocoon needed the branch to change into a butterfly. She realized how much his feelings mattered when she saw the fern moving in the breeze. The nearby branches were protecting the cocoon, helping it grow. This moment changed her life. From then on, she started to see things differently, giving her a new understanding of what life was about. She felt freer and was able to step away from the chaos around her. She began to see that some people acted in ways that made her feel upset and confused. That was when she started to distance herself from Fen's brother. As she paid less attention to the little things he did, it became clear that he wanted to keep her under his control. The more he felt that slipping away, the harder he tried to hold on. Looking back, she saw his actions like a system rewarding loyalty based on how well people followed the rules. The return of the Wumings to her father's life revealed many hidden truths. She learned why some things had happened in ways that confused her for so long. Her father had promised to take care of the Wumings and the family wealth he had trusted to them. She felt sadness when her parents talked about their experiences in the work camps. They had witnessed the public execution of Dirk's parents for their beliefs, giving them a perspective that few would understand. It was hard for them to stay quiet because speaking out could lead to danger. Their calm behavior, often seen as agreement, ultimately kept them safe from the bad fate that befell Dirk's family. Sadly, she realized that many people in her new country might not appreciate the importance of free speech until they lost it. Her father told her that her journey had made her the strongest and most determined of his children, and that his father would have been proud of her. They were all surprised at how each of them had connected with the Wumings for different reasons. Reflecting on the past, she realized the wisdom of her father's choice to trust the Wumings, who shared his views on authority. The bond with the Wumings helped improve her relationship with her parents, allowing her to release some blame she had held against them. She would always feel that the Wumings brought her family closer. When she arrived in America, she took it upon herself to help the Wumings adjust to their new freedoms. The change had been tough for all three of them as they learned a new culture and language. However, after a few months, they began to feel more at home. For her parents, the adjustment was harder because they were both in their 50s and found it difficult to accept new things. Learning to share their thoughts and feelings openly was a big change from their past lives. They found support in a Chinese Christian community, which helped them adapt. With their help, her parents rediscovered the tastes and recipes of the foods they loved, and it brought them joy to express their beliefs freely. It felt good to have things explained in their own language, as it made it easier to understand the society around them. Those first few years were a time for personal growth and excitement as they learned about their new home. They began to appreciate the value of freedom, something many Americans might overlook. This freedom allowed them to dream big. Her father shared how his life path was controlled by the government even before he was an adult. From a young age, their education prepared them for the roles the government set for them. Their success depended on being loyal to the state, which focused more on community than family. As she began her teaching career, she found joy in helping her students appreciate the opportunities in this country. In time, she hoped they would understand the real meaning of freedom. She noticed how the Chinese Communist Party kept a close watch on people's lives once they stepped outside. When Fen first showed Suling a picture of the ring that Alana had worn, Suling could feel Fen's excitement. She sensed the ring was important to Fen, but needed to be sure. That night, Suling learned more about Fen's beliefs regarding her identity. Suling was happy to support her cousin and appreciated the trust Fen had in her. They made a plan for Suling to go to the prom as Fen's date, allowing Suling to explore her feelings for someone special. Her uncle agreed, thinking his daughter was still too young to date seriously. As soon as they entered the multi-purpose room, Suling's eyes were drawn to Fen. Fen pointed out the couple she had mentioned before, and Suling watched them closely, looking for any signs. She wished for her dreams to come true, and felt excited as she saw the master of ceremonies, who was Chinese, dancing in a traditional way with an American man in front of the audience. The dance showed grace and care, making it clear they had practiced a lot for this moment. She could see that both had worked hard to achieve this level of skill. Fen had already recognized him as Alana's boyfriend, and mentioned he had lived in her country before. From bits of conversations she overheard, she learned they were the talk of the town because of the TV shows that followed their love story. When she asked about their popularity, she found out how well he had taken care of the 2 eagles they had set free. Suling's curiosity was piqued since she had seen him do extraordinary things in nature before. One day they found a tiny bird that had fallen from its nest. She was asked to stand quietly and watch over it, while Dirk seemed to focus deeply on the peaceful sounds around them. After a moment, he picked up the baby bird and gently cupped it in his hand. Then he jumped up, grabbing a branch, and climbed up into the tree, disappearing among the leaves. Suling was amazed to see how still the branches were where he had hidden. A short time later, he came back without the bird. "It's back with its mother now," he explained. "I just hope my scent doesn't make her reject it." This surprised Suling. She had never thought about such things. Dirk's concern for the small details that could change a life deeply impressed her. They returned each day for a week to check the area, wanting to see if the young bird had survived. If she hadn't been with him that day, she would have missed seeing him blend so perfectly into the tree. This experience taught her that even simple actions could have a big effect on the world around them. Looking back, she remembered many moments like this with him that influenced their lives. A fellow teacher had agreed to introduce them. Still, she felt astonished when Dirk spoke his first words in their language after she asked to see the ring his girlfriend wore. His voice echoed in her mind, and in that moment, it felt like all her dreams were coming true. When he told her she was the beautiful butterfly he always knew she could be, warmth filled her heart. Overwhelmed with emotions, she rushed into his arms, and he held her gently, making her wish for that moment to last forever. He looked different from what she had imagined, taller and with a more polished appearance than she expected. He was tall, which made him look a bit thinner than other men his age in North America, but back in his home country, he would be seen as a celebrity. She noticed that he didn't have any facial hair, even though his adopted father took great pride in his own. The Zen master's long goatee was impressive, at least a foot long. Wuming's kind nature showed in the way he acted and spoke. His gentle voice made a strong impression. In that moment, she realized he would always be special to her because he was different from all the other boys and men she had known. She felt a deep connection to him that night. After their first dance together, she was filled with the feeling that they were meant to be together. As they headed home from the prom, Fen asked her how she felt. She said Wayne Cheng, which means whole or complete. She added that she felt they were always meant to be. Seeing him in a stylish suit made her appreciate how he could fit into both cultures comfortably. Fen noticed the joy on Suling's face, recognizing that love was blossoming. They stopped at an all-night diner, where they spent hours chatting about Suling's childhood memories with Wuming. It was an eye-opening experience for Fen, as she learned just how much Wuming had influenced Suling's life. She had to come to terms with the fact that all the stories Suling had shared with her growing up were true. Fen asked, "Is he the one you've been waiting for? I can see so much joy on your face. It's as if you've reached a new level of happiness." Suling replied in their native language, "The last night we were in China, I returned his father's ring to him. He told me I was like a butterfly ready to blossom and promised he would make his way to America. I shared my dream of us walking through life together as partners. He promised he would find a way to come to America. My love for him is just as strong today as it was then. Fen, you have to understand, I always believed he would escape his past. I trusted that Wuming would stay true to his beliefs. I knew even then that not even time would hold him back from his dreams, because Zen monks see time differently. They view it as the seasons of life. To them, death is merely a step into the next stage. This belief helps them not to fear death." Before leaving the diner, they agreed not to mention Wuming in front of others due to his past struggles. Her father, after welcoming Wuming back into their lives, praised her for her wise choice, explaining to her that he needed to live carefully because of how others might act around him. She really didn't understand what he was saying until her father mentioned that some of their relatives might still be in touch with their home country. That's when she began to see how important the Chinese government was. His thoughts also confirmed the Wuming's worries. It opened her eyes, and now she had important things to talk about with him regarding their situation. Many new teachers at the meeting were asking about matters that didn't concern them. She hadn't noticed it until they announced that her name had changed. Circumstances had brought Fen, Alana, and her together, and any early feelings of competition quickly faded. As their friendship grew, the strong bond between Suling and the Wuming became clear. This allowed Alana to see how special and strong their connection was. Surprisingly, it was Alana who first suggested they should become close friends, as she had already been chosen to be his partner. It took some convincing for Suling to believe Alana was serious, but it soon became clear she was. In a quiet moment, Suling asked the Wuming why he still wore the cross she had cut from his neck. His answer was simple but spoke volumes. "I was given this to hold on to until the person it belonged to comes back for me when it is safe. As long as I keep it, I believe my grandfather will return for me so we can be together again." Later, she shared what the Wuming had said with his father, who shed a few tears before softly saying, "With faith, one can move mountains." This made her realize that everything the Wuming did since their first meeting was based on his beliefs. He also mentioned that even as a child, his faith helped him get through the challenges he faced growing up. "Suling, no matter what happens in his life," Lachey said, "the Wuming's understanding, which can be hard for many to see, will help him make the right choices at the right times. His main challenge is managing the two beliefs he was raised with. Luckily, this helps him look for the greater good for everyone." Fen had been careful around her father and brother for weeks because of a private conversation she had overheard. She had found it by chance and was thankful her father hadn't discovered her hiding in a corner of their basement. She was going through family records in their storage area to see if she could confirm what they thought was true. Her father had told the person on his cell phone about an incident that had happened in the kitchen of his restaurant, revealing that the Wuming had been found and that he had unknowingly held on to what they had been searching for all along. He started to share how a certain truth had come to light. As he spoke, he wasn't sure if the Wuming had figured out how to read the information in the chip. She felt unsure about making a move while she heard her father's voice, uncertain of his possible reactions if he found her. For a long time, she thought her father's treatment of his older brother was too harsh, even though it was common in their culture for someone who had brought shame to the family. Learning that his actions were planned and guided by someone on the phone shocked her. They were trying to get him to say what they wanted. They believed if her uncle was near trusted family, he might reveal important information. Those her father was responding to thought her uncle held the key to what they needed. In some ways, they were correct because nobody knew that the Wuming had been guarding the very thing they were seeking. This made her respect her uncle more. Despite everything against him, he stayed true to his values. To hide his true self in plain sight and avoid attention showed great strength of character. She needed to warn Suling, Alana, and Dirk that they were being watched, as they needed to understand what the Wuming had discovered. She questioned why her father was so devoted to the Communist Party, a system she thought they had all fled. Her background, known by few back home, could have led to years of pressure to fit into communist ideals. Being different was seen as a problem, not a choice. They thought it was their fault for not changing her. Those who faced such scrutiny often spent years conforming or were sent away. The freedoms they enjoyed here were what many in China longed for. Fortunately, since they had obligations, her father and brother would not be there when the four of them gathered. When she asked her mother about her father's work, she found out that her mother was mostly unaware of his dealings outside of the restaurant. It reminded her that in Chinese culture, there was no true equality, and everyone understood the roles they were expected to play. Follow the rules, or there will be serious problems. Everyone knew that a strict group made decisions and things only happened with special approval. They planned to meet at a restaurant at 1 o'clock, and Fen felt nervous. She was hoping that with her friends, they could find a way to help her escape her difficult situation. Fen was afraid of her father, especially after hearing him make a chilling promise. "I will do whatever it takes, no matter the cost." Suling and Fen waited outside Fen's family restaurant, wanting to keep their chat light. They were aware that there might be people listening who could tell Fen's father what they said. Fen hugged Suling tightly and whispered her worries to her. When she heard, Suling suggested they get into her car. "For everyone's safety, it's better to have lunch elsewhere," she said. Once they left the restaurant parking lot, Fen turned to Alana and me in the back seat and said in a hushed voice, "My father is involved with the Chinese government." She then shared how she discovered this. Suling pulled over to focus on what Fen was saying. After listening, she asked, "Is your brother part of this too? Do we need to help keep you safe from him? Will he come back once his task is done? I guess I won't be helping out at the restaurant anymore." "I don't have solid proof, but I know my older brother handles all the computer work for the restaurant since my father isn't good with technology. If he's not an agent, he's definitely supporting my father. My dad has always felt he didn't belong in American life, and now I see why." After hearing that, I took out my phone and called David. He answered quickly, and the three women heard me say, "We need to speed up the road work and the new housing development above the iron ore mine. Please approve hiring more workers right away. Also, ask the legal team to start looking into buying prefabricated log homes in bulk. We want to find good discounts. I'll explain more when I see you next. Any reusable wood should go to the local mill for various projects. I want the lots set for Suling and Fen ready as soon as possible." After hanging up, I sent him a text saying, "I want construction to run 7 days a week." Suling and Fen looked at us, curious about what was happening, so I decided to explain what I could. "I know both of you have learned that for many years it was usual for companions to live with those they served. Alana and I have decided to meet this tradition part way and will build each of you a home on the other side of the valley. This way, you can stay close to us, just as is customary. Once the homes are finished, the titles will be given to you. Also, because of what we are facing, I have made a will. If something happens to me, it's arranged so that if the money left is invested wisely, it should provide a steady income for your needs throughout your lives. Suling has often said that you think ahead to prepare for what may come. With that in mind, Suling, I believe we should talk to your parents about whether I can stay with them until I finish high school. Right now, I feel my father might use me to get what he wants from Dirk. He once said he would do anything necessary, even if it caused problems. I also plan to complete my university studies online," Fen said. "I can't be sure that I am safe where I am now." "Fen," I replied, "I can't disagree with your reasoning. After our brunch, let's go speak with Suling's parents to see if they are open to it. Looking back at the day my identity was revealed, it makes sense why your father acted the way he did toward me. He must have realized his control over his brother and family was changing. He began to see how determined I would be as an opponent." Alana took my hand and said, "I really dislike the heavy price of politics. It feels like one of the biggest problems in the world, all because it's driven by the need for power and control. Even in our country, it's clear that many actions are taken for reasons that don't connect with what people actually need." The Creator knew that in the end, humanity would behave in ways that many might not understand, as it could seem unbelievable, I said. The main issue society faces is that those who try to live as reasonably as possible are a small group. They often avoid engaging out of fear that it will lower their own standards in the chaos of society. Those who get involved in politics often have a limited viewpoint, swayed by emotions and influenced by the messages from the mass media, which they think represents what people truly want. Over the years, the media has become very good at persuading people, shown by how different groups can focus on the same event in completely different ways. For example, I have always made it a point not to drink and drive, especially after losing a close friend in an accident involving a drunk driver. There is often more to the story of that sad night than what people share. The person who hit him was struggling with thoughts of ending her own life and turned to alcohol for a false sense of bravery. In a careless moment, she drove into oncoming traffic, causing the crash. Although later investigations found a note expressing her feelings, this information was never made public. I learned about this from my friend's brother on the day of the funeral. "Why would someone hurt an innocent person?" Fern asked. "Some people go through life not knowing the value of life, including their own," I said. In her case, I think she needed approval from others, which may have come from her upbringing. My adopted father, a Zen master, taught me to respect all living things, visible or not, because they are all connected. Everything made by the Creator has a purpose, even if we cannot see it. Ignoring this shows a lack of understanding. In her mind, her actions might have seemed reasonable, and she probably felt no guilt for them. She saw her own life as a solution to her problems, sadly overlooking the importance of life itself. Fen looked at her cousin and asked, "Has he always viewed life this way?" Suling smiled before answering, "From the first night we met, I was drawn in, spending hours trying to understand his thoughts. At first, his words felt like tricky puzzles. As we grew up, I began to understand as I faced situations that related to his teachings. These experiences changed my perspective. I didn't realize then that his words were meant to help me see beyond my limited viewpoint. They expanded my understanding of the world. Now, as an adult, his ideas feel clearer and more refined, and the insights into human behavior have stood the test of time. He has taught me to find balance in things that others often ignore, knowing that there are rarely clear explanations for human actions beyond what we see." Growing up with both Christian teachings and the principles of Zen, I find it hard to understand a culture that not only conflicts with itself, but also harms the earth. We all need to appreciate everything around us, or we risk losing our connection to it. Love is vital because it supports the human spirit, I said. Without love, our self-esteem suffers, and we lose confidence in ourselves. Because of this, we might find it hard to feel confident in life. Sometimes we pull back and focus only on our own thoughts, which can hurt our well-being. Love also helps guide us and keeps us from making bad choices. Many people who hurt others don't really understand what love is. The room was quiet as everyone thought about what I said. This led to a talk about why people act the way they do, something often hard to explain. We all agreed that people spend too much time trying to find reasons for their actions when sometimes there just aren't any. It's easier to blame outside forces instead of taking responsibility. This pointed out an important difference in how some governments work. One holds people accountable, while the other lets many behaviors slide. After a nice brunch, I called Lachey to see if he and his wife could meet with the four of us. After he agreed, we went back to drop the ladies at their cars. My Chinese grandparents were happy to see us. After we said hello, Fen asked her uncle and aunt if she could move in with them, explaining her reasons. I watched her share what she had overheard. I knew Lachey must have felt the weight of what he was hearing, but he kept his feelings to himself. He said, "It's always the one closest to you." Mei-Ling gave her approval before Lachey could say anything, so the three ladies went to pick which of the 3 empty bedrooms Fern would use, leaving Lachey and me alone. "I had my doubts," Lachey said in Chinese, There were signs I couldn't explain, but nothing that proved anything for sure. I can see now how closely they were watching me. I didn't suspect my younger brother at all. I promised myself after staying with the Zen monks not to share anything, even with my wife, because I felt that once I did, my time here would be over. Suling, Myling, and I thought we had left those events behind us, but when you came back, we began to see things more clearly. "I'm sorry for bringing all this up again," I replied. "Honestly, I had no idea that Suling was your daughter. I was just so happy to have my childhood friend back. My adopted father, the Zen master, had known about our friendship and had kept us safe from being found out. Truth has its own time." "Always has, always will," Lachey said. "I believe that the Chinese government is running out of time. When everything falls into place, it will collapse quickly. I just hope we're here to see it. Be careful not to overthink things and give them an advantage they shouldn't have. Remember, they don't know what we know, and they will soon feel the pressure. Your advantage is that they can't take you out until they understand the information we have." "I've opened the file and made copies of the information in several safe places," I explained. "Some of the names in it are now members of the Chinese Communist Party's inner circle. The information is so damaging that it makes sense why they reacted the way they did. Until these people are out of the picture, the party could be in trouble." Lachey looked deep in thought as he considered what I just said. We could hear the ladies getting closer. When they entered the living room, Lachey said loudly so everyone could hear, "I think we should help Fern gather her things, just in case my brother and nephew cause trouble. For her safety, Fern needs to stay away from them until this is settled. It might also be a good idea for Suling to move back here, because we need to make sure they are safe. Things can be unpredictable, just like in my home country, and the danger can come from anyone, anywhere." We took 2 cars over to Fern's parents' house. Luckily, only her mother was home, and after she learned the reason for our visit, she was happy to assist in packing. Lachey introduced me to her and confirmed that I was the one known as Wooming. She was surprised to learn that Suling and her daughter were part of my close circle. Her understanding of her husband's behavior helped her see why her daughter was in such a situation because of me. Like Fern, she was astonished to find out that I was real and not just a story from her niece. When she asked why the government was after me, I explained that the data my parents had gathered was seen as a threat, and they were still trying to find it. They were using their beliefs as an excuse to justify actions they couldn't face openly. Until they found and dealt with that information, no one was safe, as it would reveal truths they wanted to keep hidden. The fear of what they didn't know was a danger to them, because they always needed to be in control. Fern and the rest of us were taken aback when her mother said, "If I can confirm what you've told me, I will have no choice but to file for a divorce. Though I miss some things about our home country, I will never go back to living without the freedom we have now, nor can I stay with someone linked to the Chinese Communist Party. I have kept quiet for too long. Now it's time for me to speak up." "How will you explain it to your husband?" I asked. "I will tell him that you told me you were the Wooming and that his brother confirmed it. I will mention that Suling and my daughter were named as part of your trusted group and that you believe it's time to include them in your plans," Fen's mother said. "I had to learn the truth from you when you asked for permission to take care of her until she is an adult. This way, he can't be upset with me since I have only followed our traditions. Let him handle whatever problems this might cause for him, and please keep my daughter safe." She then mentioned she would get a prepaid phone and share the number with her daughter so they could stay in touch until everything was sorted. There were some teary farewells between mother and daughter. Lachey and I drove after the girls to his home. During the drive, we talked about his lifelong relationship with his younger brother. He summarized it clearly, saying, "The family is his party. It always has been. They must have been training him from a young age to serve the state. His entire life has been based on that expectation. He doesn't see that when they are finished with him, he will only have a lifetime of falsehoods to carry. He might be able to cope with that, or he might not. Many in his shoes have struggled with what they see in the mirror." By the end of the day, we had settled Fen into her new living space, with Suling deciding to return home as her father wished until their new homes were ready. I explained my plans and the security measures we set up. It took convincing Lachey to come see the area I was developing before he agreed to join us. He wanted to assess the security I was putting in place for all of us. I suggested that when they planned to visit, it would be a good idea for him to meet Alana's parents as well. I was pleasantly surprised when Suling revealed her new official name, which I knew she had been thinking about. Lachey noted that she chose both names because of their significance to her. Alana pointed out that these names stood for truth, endurance, and strength. I acknowledged that it was a big compliment to both her father and me. On the way back to Alana's parents' house, we talked about what had happened that day and what we should tell her parents. I noted that by changing Suling's name, she was also affirming her own choices. During the drive, Alana mentioned her mother's wish to have another child. She shared that Fen thought her mother might take action after thinking things over. I explained that Zen masters try to solve problems in a way that helps everyone, and after talking to my adopted father, I would have the final answer. "Dirk, there's something else you should know. Fen is questioning her feelings again," Alana said. "She told me this while we were driving to her parents' place. I think it's because she is starting to see men differently. It began when she learned about her father's connection to their home country, which made her think about the behavior of her father and brother." Chris Devereaux sat at his kitchen table, sipping hot coffee while reflecting on the day's events. His wife and youngest daughter were out enjoying some shopping. He called it such since they would likely come home with very little after trying on various clothes. He considered these times to be special moments spent together, doing something they both liked. They had left early, which turned out to be lucky because soon after, he got a phone call that led to a private meeting with someone who had important news. After hearing it, he called his older brother Carl, asking him to come over quickly. The decisions he faced were already made by Carl, and he was eager to hear about the effects from someone who understood the situation. An FBI investigation had made things harder for Carl, forcing him to leave his job and his long-time ties with China. Carl had resigned and moved away from Washington. While it seemed he was still working online, he had to start over after the information about him became public. It was hard to believe that a piece of sensitive information from far away could cause someone to change their job and way of life. Inside information had been picked up by those watching the embassy in Singapore, indicating that Carl was starting to be investigated by the security staff managing operations in China. If the investigation went further, there was a real chance that his secret role as a double agent would be revealed, which would be harmful for both him and the Chinese government for many reasons. He could not risk going to jail. Everyone knew that when someone was being looked into, stepping back could lessen the focus on them. Once he did that, he would have to cut all ties with his contacts and China. They would then erase all records to avoid any connection. This was important, as the Chinese government couldn't afford to lose a key recruiter to the U.S. Those considered a threat in China would be dealt with seriously. Luckily, after years of working for the government, he could retire with a salary similar to what he earned now. Like Carl, he would have to step away from his current situation. This meant leaving his job in Washington, D.C. One thing that puzzled him was why his contacts were so invested in the project he was working on with young Dirk Blackstone. Before that, they were only interested in the information he gathered about the current government and their views on China. Every few months, when Dirk submitted his latest progress report, he made a copy to share with his Chinese contacts, who were always very pleased with the insights. However, when they asked him to look into Dirk's background, things got serious. Since that was early in the ecological project, he handled the situation in a way that kept everyone satisfied. One morning, he was surprised to find representatives from the CIA waiting for him when he returned to work. After explaining what had happened, he requested the background check. They agreed, but made it clear that it would be canceled quickly due to national security. He expected more pressure from his Chinese contacts, but when he informed them of the CIA's involvement, they seemed to celebrate, happy with the news. His contact was so thrilled that he called someone right in front of Chris, excitedly telling them that the Wuming had been found. It became clear that Dirk Blackstone was the Wuming, but Chris still couldn't figure out why he was so important to the Chinese authorities. At the EPA office, Dirk was seen as a rising star who had made significant progress in restoring the planet in just a few months, far more than most had accomplished in years. Thanks to his efforts, 7 different countries were reaching out to his department to see about using his program and asking him to advise them on similar projects they wanted to start. This was one of the topics Chris needed to talk about in his meeting with Dirk and the governor of Washington State. It was clear that Dirk was achieving their shared goals without the usual political complications. Even those focused on environmental issues found no problems with his method. However, Dirk and the governor did not realize that their joint project was getting worldwide attention online, showcasing what Dirk and his team had accomplished. One question kept bothering Chris. Most people did not know about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, a large area between China and Hawaii filled with trash that covered 6 square miles. Ocean currents kept pushing different items toward this spot, and a recent cleanup had taken away over 63,000 pounds of plastic from the water. A small start, really. Chris wanted to find out if Dirk's system for breaking down plastic could be safely used in salt water. Chris thought about why his contacts in China were interested in Dirk. They knew Dirk had created an important process. China had a reputation for being a major polluter, and they understood that improving their environmental practices could enhance their image globally. Checking the time, Chris noticed his brother would be arriving in about half an hour. This gave him enough time to change out of his suit, allowing him to look more casual and relaxed. If someone was watching him, his brother's visit would appear normal and not like an arranged business meeting. Carl listened as Chris shared what had happened earlier that day. Then he said, "It sounds like you're starting to draw attention, but you have time to distance yourself before it gets worse." I did that, and the scrutiny on me went away. But I was warned not to get involved with anything related to politics or China, or it might come back. Often, past actions are overlooked if there's a change in administration and the situation is resolved. Public pressure can lead those in power to act. Once I got back on track, I received a surprise thank you from our employer in the East. "So, can you say there hasn't been any lasting damage from your choices?" Chris asked. "Actually, it's been quite good for me," Carl replied. "My health has improved a lot, and I've stopped taking my medication. My relationship with my wife and family has also gotten much better because I'm not as stressed. My wife feels like she sees the man she married again. If I had understood the consequences of my choices earlier, I would have left years ago. My wife and I are thinking about selling our home and moving to a quieter neighborhood because we want a simpler life." "Really? Why do you think so?" Chris asked. "I believe it because it's true," Carl replied. "I don't want to worry anymore about living in fear each day. I just wish I had realized the true cost of my choices sooner. Maybe I would have made different decisions." After his brother left, Chris went to his home office and started to write his resignation letter. It was easier than he expected because his brother's words were heavy on his mind. He understood that the worries he carried for most of his life had affected him in ways he didn't notice before. He wondered what he would be like once he was free from these burdens. He would tell his wife and daughter that he had been thinking about retiring early for a while and that now was the right time to do it. It had been a busy week. David and I had been hiring workers all week. The lumber company was bringing down trees from the mountainside, using horses to pull the logs for delivery to the mill. They used horses because there wasn't enough room for heavy machines to reach the work area. Ian watched the work for a whole day. It reminded him of when he was younger. Alana didn't know that her great-grandfather had used horses for many years when he first started logging. We worked with the iron ore company to clear rocks from the mountain so that we could build a new office building. Thanks to their help, it only took one small effort to create the space we needed. The machines were already turning leftover materials into useful items for the roads and to make concrete blocks for the log home's foundations. David's main crew was building the foundation and reinforcing the concrete floor with extra support. After hearing about the weekend events, David decided it would be smart to set up a security office on the main floor, adding to the original building plan. With this new setup, everyone entering the building would go through security checks, just like other public buildings. On Friday morning at 10, work came to a halt, and all staff gathered for a meeting. We shared the exciting news that we had finalized plans with the district to build a school that would be ready for the next school year. For many of them, it was when the idea of the village felt real. Legal answered many questions about how the land lease would work for the village. During a chat with our team, while legal was present, we talked about starting a small bank. I showed interest in the idea, but only if the bank was owned by the community. One of the legal staff mentioned that it might take up to a year to get all the government approvals, as long as we could prove we had enough money to run the operation successfully. One of our team leaders suggested that people interested in buying shares could have a portion of their paycheck set aside for this purpose. Legal supported this idea and suggested that we create a separate bank account for the funds, which could also earn interest. The team leader proposed that we use the total saved at the end of each month to invest in government bonds, which we could cash in when ready. I announced that if we raised enough money, I would contribute half of what was collected in exchange for 1/3 of the shares. Many saw this as a good step forward. Legal said they would send a text message for everyone to vote on the idea. A second message would share the results once all votes were counted. David informed everyone that we had applied for a long-term lease on land near the main road. I shared our plan to develop part of it into a ski resort in winter and a small campground in summer. Someone suggested moving our main entrance to the area next to the new land we wanted to acquire. Legal agreed to check into this, but mentioned we would need approval from the mining company. Just after our meeting, as staff returned to their tasks, I got a call from the governor. He informed me that our planned meeting would have to be delayed because Chris Devereaux had resigned that morning after 30 years of service. Alana called me with some worrying news that needed immediate attention. Li Dongfen's older brother had been watching their high school every day this week, waiting until their uncle picked her up. I felt this was a way to show control over the situation. What we didn't know was that big changes were happening at the Dong family home due to our actions the previous weekend. La Dong found, upon returning home, that the doors had been locked and reinforced, making it impossible for him to get in. As he walked around the house, he saw the safety measures he once taught his wife were now being used against him. For about an hour, he tried to call his wife, but she did not answer. He then called his son, hoping to reach her and share some good news. After about 10 minutes, his son called back with news that he didn't want to hear. His wife had learned that he was working for their country and had been from the start. Lee told him he had to say that their family money, plus interest, would come back to them when they returned. She now realized that their leaving the country had been a trick. His wife also found out that Fen had been closely involved with the Wooming, something he had not told her. He thought things couldn't get worse until his son said Fen had left their home, taking all her things. B, his wife, had met the Wooming and had agreed in writing for him to care for Fen until she was old enough by law. His brother had brought the Wooming to their home and explained everything. According to his wife, Fen had left because of his political views and the many truths he had kept from her. For now, Fen stayed with her uncle until the Wooming built a home for her where she would live as Alana's partner. Ladong felt like he was losing control and knew his handler would not be happy when he and his brother ended their relationship. He knew there would be problems because it would look like he had not handled the situation well. He worried about what those problems might be. His access to information about the Wooming was becoming limited due to factors he couldn't change. Lee had said clearly that his mother would not let him come back to their home under the current circumstances. She would never allow him to bring her back to China. "Dad, I have never heard Mom speak with such strength," he shared. When his son came back, he packed a few clothes for him, as his wife saw their marriage as over. Ladong realized he had a huge problem because in the Chinese Communist Party, a man who couldn't manage his family's beliefs was seen as unfit. Li Dong usually closed the restaurant after the cleanup crew finished for the day. His father had mostly stayed away from the restaurant because of his personal struggles. Their handler had called to check on the situation. Lee had to explain that his father was no longer with his mother. That was when he was told to find out as much as he could about anyone in the Wooming's life. The handler mentioned they had lost their direct link to the Wooming because people were keeping a close eye on Lee's actions. "Your father is becoming a risk," their handler said. "When I share this new information, you may have to make some tough choices. I need to know if you care more about the party than your family." Li Dong understood what his supervisor was getting at and quickly confirmed his loyalty. He started to worry about his father's situation. Was he in trouble? Had revealing the truth unknowingly put his father at risk? He remembered the times he helped his dad look into the rumors about the Wuming in their country. He didn't realize until now that both his uncle and the Wuming were being watched closely because of information gathered from former members of the council who had lost their positions. Many of them had shared what they knew because they felt insecure about their futures. He had just finished locking the back door of the restaurant after checking everything was safe when something hit him on the side of his head. As his vision cleared, he saw a man in traditional monk's clothing. The man extended his hand as though offering help. His head was covered, keeping his face in shadow. "Your days are being counted," the voice said. Lee understood the seriousness of the words, which meant that if he continued on his current path, he would face big problems. "You want to get back what was taken from you," the man continued in Chinese. "You are fighting against a system that is losing its power, for calls for justice are getting stronger. Leave Fen alone and let her do her job. Tell your supervisor that what one of the council members seeks can be found right before him if he dares to face a truth he wants to ignore. It is in how he acts when he thinks no one is watching." "Are you with the Wuming?" Li Dong asked, feeling dizzy. By the time he steadied himself, the figure had disappeared. He stood there, shaking, now truly feeling fear for the first time. Whoever that was had made it clear that he was just a player in a bigger game. He realized there was much more to the Wuming situation than he had been told. No matter what lay ahead, he was no longer safe because of how he had been used. Li Dong reached into his shirt pocket for a cigarette, hoping it would help calm him, but instead he found a piece of paper with it. He took out his cell phone and called his father, sharing what had happened. His father replied, "Run for your life." When Li Dong asked why, his father explained, "If you send that message and it's true, they will need to know more. Our handler will want to find out who delivered it. If you can't meet their needs, they might recall you to China for serious questioning. You may end up feeling very different when it's over. The person who sent you the message put you in a tough spot on purpose. The choice is yours. If you don't speak up, the truth could come out anyway. Your best bet is to act like the meeting never happened." "It seems like you're saying I should go into hiding. I'm going back to put the cash receipts in the safe, and will stay until the bank opens on Monday. I'll take the weekend's cash and find a place to stay hidden. The bank can take back my car. I will reach out in a few months when things settle down," Li Dong said. "Head to the place we talked about," Li Dong suggested. "I will follow you after my divorce, as my family issues are making my standing with the party uncertain. Your absence might tilt the balance." He had learned how to vanish without a trace. Both he and his father had received new identities over the last few years, including updated driver's licenses, social security numbers, passports, and birth certificates. These could help them start a new life in a neutral country with little trouble, and people would usually accept them without questions. Plus, they had a good amount of money saved in a Swiss account, easy to access from any ATM. Li Dong thought about what happened to his son and wondered why his bosses hadn't told him about the skills the Wuming possessed. Although his son couldn't recognize the person involved, Li Dong suspected it was someone trained in techniques like those taught by Zen masters. If that were true, it meant this person had been taught from a young age, breaking their old traditions. No one from outside had ever been allowed into the inner circle of their training. If this was just a hint of the person's abilities, he knew he couldn't use Suling or his daughter to protect himself. The Wuming had clearly shown them just a fraction of what they could do. He remembered when he had turned a solid stone Buddha into sand and wondered what other powers they had. One thing was obvious. Leaving someone in a difficult position where their next move could bring serious problems was clever, showing how far he was willing to go if he was pushed. On Monday morning, Li Dong left Richmond on an eastbound train. Late Monday night, Alana called me to say that Fen's mother was upset because her son had suddenly left town and she had hired a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. She wanted to know if I had anything to do with it. She knew me well enough that I couldn't avoid her questions, so I shared a little about what happened. Fen had noticed something was wrong because her brother wasn't there to pick her up. That's when she told me about a meeting between the two brothers. Changes in layers. Fawn Wang was now called the Love Machine by everyone who worked in her mistress's home. She walked into the lovely Diaojiaolu, which had once belonged to her grandfather. She earned this nickname because of the great services she provided, which made her popular. As word spread, the demand for her grew, and so did the cost of her services. Many trusted her, and some even suggested that she should start her own business. Her mistress, Wu Wing, often boasted about how much extra business Fawn was bringing in. That evening, she was with a man she didn't know, who had picked her up in a fancy car from a neutral spot and brought her to this location. He seemed very confident, and she thought she was about to meet someone important. Once she arrived, she was told she could use the built-in bar since they had about an hour to reach their destination on the outskirts of the city. She assumed they were going to see a new client. In recent months, she had been moving up in the social circles of those she served. With each step, she changed her look to match the painted mask she always wore. Each mask was meant to show respect to the importance of the client she was meeting. What she would wear, the makeup style, and her hairstyle had always been decided by Wu Wing, who was very careful about these details. However, that had changed recently. 3 weeks ago, through a secret contact with the police, she went through a procedure to change her facial features so she wouldn't be recognized from her past. Madame Wu Wing said it was important for her upcoming meetings with powerful people in Chinese society, but Fawn felt there was more to it. Before she left to meet her escort, Wu Wing hugged her and whispered, "No matter what happens, always remember you've become one of my best." Tonight would be her first event since leaving the hospital, and she was excited. In the quiet of her own space, she made a list of those who might be responsible for their actions and the secrets they shared with her. It seemed that personal conversations often led to revealing information. Most people didn't realize that their meetings with her could lead to their downfall. Tonight, she aimed to gather more clues that could take down those who had let important details slip. Wu Wing had taken her shopping for a new wardrobe at a fancy store meant for the wealthy. She said it was a reward for the new clients Fawn had brought in. The clothes were designed to impress those in high society who followed the latest styles. Fawn was shocked by how expensive the clothes were, but had to admit that they made her look better. Wu Wing spent more money on her than she had expected, making Fawn careful and determined to meet any expectations that came up. As she got ready for her first night back at work, she was told to wear one of the new outfits and do her makeup as if she were enjoying a restful day. She wondered if the changes in her look had boosted her confidence in her role. Fawn felt proud of herself for adapting to meet the standards of those in charge, which helped her grow in ways she had never imagined. The doctor who helped with her changes had been chosen by the person she was meeting that evening. She was surprised to find out that this doctor was one of the best in the field in China. It was also this person's orders that led to the tattoos on her back. When she asked Wu Wing about them, she was told that everything would be explained in due time. Using various mirrors, she noticed that the tattoo featured 3 blue roses intertwined, stretching down her spine. Seeing her new look for the first time was a surprise. Her appearance matched her feelings about herself. She had started to understand her identity and her ability to connect with others in ways she hadn't before. The house brought back happy memories of her family time while growing up. Back then, society was very different, and the world of technology was just beginning. The house was 3 stories tall on a large piece of land within a gated community. For those at this level of Chinese society, it offered a type of privacy that everyday people didn't have. He had left it when he got promoted because their home was seen as a symbol of importance in the Chinese Communist Party. The old house, built from partially petrified wood, was older than most people living. With each new tenant, it had been updated to fit their needs. She enjoyed the subtle changes she noticed as she stood just inside the door. It had a warm and welcoming feminine touch. The escort unlocked the door, letting her step inside. The last time she had been in this place was to say goodbye to her grandfather before she left to study for her master's degree at Oxford in England. While studying mathematics, she became interested in legal investigations. Watching classic mystery movies, she often tried to solve the puzzles before the endings, realizing she had a natural talent for it. After returning home, she applied to join the secret police, and thanks to her grandfather's support, she was accepted, even though the organization had other plans for her. What Fawn Wang didn't know was that someone was watching her to make sure she still moved with the elegance expected of someone from her background. Coming from an upper-class family, she learned to carry herself with poise. This grace helped her quickly rise in her social circles, making her a person that others sought out. She realized that the lessons on appearance and manners learned in childhood still shaped her today. Her new look had been carefully designed to enhance her beauty and remove the birthmarks she had since birth. The new Fawn Wang was remarkably attractive and would no longer be recognized by anyone from her past. When compared to the photo in her records, it would be hard for anyone to believe they were the same person. The plastic surgeon had skillfully crafted her features, giving her an appealing and warm presence that attracted those around her. The changes made in recent months ensured that she would stay undercover during her assignments. Before Fawn Wang arrived at Wu Wing's operations center, Ju Li had been informed about her joining Wu's team. In a short time, the woman observing her learned more about Fawn than she knew about herself. 3 main points stood out. First, she had been a newcomer during a raid on the Zen temple, searching for someone who had escaped. Second, with her new look, people would not guess her true age. The third point, which was the most important, was that she had never been married, meaning she had no family issues to deal with. An extra bonus was that under Madame Wu's guidance, she had really grown. Over the years, Wu Wing and Fawn had worked together whenever they could. As a result, they built a relationship based on trust and respect. Considering Fawn's background, Wu decided that since she was single, she would be ideal for a unique long-term assignment. Wu Wing was the only one who understood her personal challenges and why they needed to stay private. Their connection had grown over the years from being simple colleagues to being close friends. When she learned that Fawn was being investigated, she quickly tried to find out who had asked for this operation. However, no one seemed to know anything about it. Fawn's last job had been linked to Wang Ling, a key figure connected to Wu Ming and one of the most wanted people in China. This made her suspect that Wang Ling might have something to do with Fawn's unexpected troubles. She felt that her friend Wu Wing was holding back information, as their talks suggested. Wu Wing had chosen Fawn's clients carefully. These clients were people who couldn't afford to have their actions revealed because of the strict views in society about such activities. She wanted to find out if Fawn had any limits on what she would do for their country. From what they had learned, Fawn was open to anything, and she had a knack for keeping secrets. Both of these skills would be valuable in her upcoming tasks. Fawn was 5'6" and had a balanced figure. Because she watched her diet and prepared well, she carried herself confidently. Some small changes had helped her look youthful, which would be useful for the role she needed to play. Her manner was friendly and warm, which would appeal to the person she needed to talk to. Observations showed that Fawn had an appearance that the target would find pleasing. In her current setting, her looks would grab attention in a positive way, without coming across as overly bold. After her first week with Wu Wing's group, she asked for advice on understanding relationships that weren't typical in their society. She wanted to learn how these connections worked while respecting the norms of the state. Through her training, Fawn had become skilled at connecting with women, often leading them to think they were genuinely drawn to her. This ability allowed her to gather useful information about their husbands' political interests. The women were willing to help because of their situations. Stepping away from Wu Wing's group had not come easy, as some people had been pressuring her for years. Fawn planned to tackle these challenges over the next few months, making sure that those responsible faced the right consequences. Many would see their situations change significantly due to their actions. This was part of the job, and she accepted it as the cost of doing business. She had approached her supervisors for their opinions on the situation since she wanted to use Fawn for a longer period. Since the assignment would take a while and involve work abroad, she needed their approval. After explaining the assignment and its potential issues, she worried it might be turned down. However, approval came quickly when they learned about Fawn's family connections, which surprised her. The only thing that troubled her was that in the name of Wu Wing, the country had to give over $1 million to the Zen temple, which they believed had been hiding the Wu Ming. By the time she finished, Fawn would be going to America as a legal immigrant teacher, moving from New York City mainly because of growing safety concerns. She was being sent to connect with Fen Dong, a 17-year-old girl trying to figure out her identity. The goal was for Fawn to help Fen develop a meaningful emotional bond. Thanks to contacts in the school district, Fawn would replace a math teacher going on maternity leave. Building a close relationship with Fen would help them reach their goal. Field agents mentioned that Fen's father and older brother were not managing well in their roles, leading to the choice to remove them when things settled down, making sure there were no loose ends. They hoped Fawn could bond with Fen during a difficult time, especially after recent family losses. This was important as their traditional methods with Dirk Campbell, known as Dirk Blackstone, were no longer effective. Before leaving the sitting room, Julie looked at Fawn Wang, wanting to create a sense of shared experience and trust. She wanted to show Fawn the tattoo she had received, a sign of honor for those in important roles within the security police. Julie had earned her tattoo a few years ago after handling a sensitive situation involving the president of China. Julie hoped Fawn would quickly see their future together as a partnership of equals. Tonight, she looked forward to discovering how skilled Fawn had become at creating a deep connection with someone willing to engage. Fawn watched the stunningly beautiful woman as she came down the stairs. Everything she did showed confidence. Fawn never expected someone to be so bold in a house filled with old traditions. She was eager to see what possibilities lay ahead. When the woman reached the main floor, she turned around slowly, allowing Fawn to appreciate her striking appearance. Fawn noticed a tattoo on her back, showing she had an important background. "Miss Wang, what you see is the mark of belonging to a special organization," the woman said in a warm, inviting voice. "It's for those who have shown loyalty to the system. If someone claims to have authority, make sure they can prove it. Congratulations on becoming our newest member. My name is Ju Li, and your new name is now Louis too. This plan is to keep our families safe because of our special roles. These past few months weren't just a job," Fawn said. "It was a test." "Think of it as practice," Julie explained. "The skills you learned will be important for your next task." She offered her hand and showed Fawn around the new place she had moved into. The first thing she did was set the alarm for the house. Fawn noticed that it had some interesting features not usually found in other homes. The windows looked ordinary from the outside, yet they were decorated with murals that made the setting seem more normal while still letting in natural light. This gave the people living there a sense of freedom not found in most places. Each room could be closed off tightly if needed. "This weekend is meant for us to bond, since I will be visiting you often for updates. That may happen quite a bit if you're as talented as people say," Ju explained as they entered the kitchen. "While I pour us some nice rice wine to celebrate our new journey, I want you to feel completely at home during your stay here until Monday morning." "Can you give me a hint about what I need to do?" Louis asked, ready for the task ahead. She knew that her life was now dedicated to the Communist Party. "At first, it will be about forming a close, trusting relationship with the future wife of Wu Ming. You'll need to be a strong guide in her life," Julie said. "She is young and inexperienced, so your support will help her grow into her new duties. We've ensured you'll have everything you need at your new place. That bedroom comes with a private bathroom. Once you create this bond, it should be easier to involve Wu Ming in key choices and actions that support our goals. In the future, you might also think about starting a family with him to secure his loyalty." "How will we explain our relationship?" Louis asked. "I'll be your married older sister," Julie replied. "We both have a shared history that we need to master before you leave for America, to prevent any mistakes." Julie felt happy about how well Louis had adapted to her new role. She handed her a glass of rice wine, and they moved to the relaxation room to talk about their plans in comfort. It would take some time for Louis to adjust to her new identity, but she knew it was necessary. She was now seen as a valuable asset that needed protection. "Is our long-term plan to work with Wu Ming?" Louis asked. "We are considering it, but the situation is tricky. We know he has a computer file that could reveal a lot about powerful people, including your grandfather, if the information is as complete as we think it is." "We can't let that happen," said Julie. "If the truth comes out, it could harm our country's government. Until we figure out what he's done with the file or if he knows how to get past its security, we can't take any action. We need to find out what the file contains before moving forward. For now, it's about waiting, and you will be our eyes on the situation. The tricky part is that I need to get close enough to their lives so they trust me," Louis too replied, wondering why they thought she could succeed when others had not. I hope we can take this time to understand each other better, Julie said gently. The clothes you ordered have arrived while you were on your way to meet. Everything related to your old life is being taken care of, except for the important information you gathered. That will be used when the time is right. We'll also handle your new ID and everything you need for your new start in the next 3 weeks as you adjust to life here. How far along are you with my new life setup? Louis asked. Will I spend the first few weeks getting settled? You've already bought a home in the area where you'll be teaching math, Julie explained. It's located in a peaceful country area and gives you plenty of privacy. We arranged for a designer to decorate it in a way that fits your new lifestyle. I think you will like it. I already do, Louis said. We have a lot of work ahead, so let's take a moment to relax as we move forward. Wang Ling had just finished his daily meditation when a young potential recruit came in. The recruit handed him an envelope that had just arrived at the temple's front door. Each fall, they welcomed 11-year-olds to learn basic martial arts. These students would attend after-school classes 3 times a week until sunset. For many, it was their first look into a monk's life. Local mothers often encouraged this, as it taught kids self-discipline, which would benefit them throughout life. There might even be 1 or 2 who showed a real interest in pursuing training with their parents' approval. When asked, the young recruit said the envelope was delivered by a special messenger and needed a signature. As Wang Ling looked at the envelope, he noticed a few things that made him think he should be careful. The lack of a return address showed that the sender wanted to stay unknown, probably to avoid attention. He asked for a copy of the delivery order, but the recruit couldn't give any details about the sender. This made him more suspicious because everything about this unexpected letter felt strange, so he got ready for any situation. The letter was meant for him, written by hand in Chinese characters, which was unusual these days. The neat spacing of the letters indicated that someone had taken time to write it, suggesting it might be important. Since he didn't expect this kind of message, he prepared himself for various outcomes, thinking about people who had faced serious problems before. Local officials looking into mysterious deaths could not share information even with families, unless it involved an accident or illness. Many believed that the people who died were targeted for opposing the Chinese Communist Party. Numerous activists had experienced sudden and unexplained deaths, leading to many rumors without clear answers. To keep himself safe, he told the recruit to leave and come back in 10 minutes. Once alone, he took steps to make sure the area was secure, keeping in mind his duty to protect others. As a Zen master, he wanted to ensure that his actions did not bring harm. After checking that everything was safe, he locked the door and took a moment to calm himself. To be cautious, he lit some candles, hoping they could help clear any bad energy from the letter. Carefully, he started to open the envelope with a letter opener, holding his breath in excitement. He was relieved to find no harmful substances inside the envelope. This was an interesting turn because it made him think that the letter might be real. Using some tools, he gently pulled the letter out and unfolded it. The single-page letter was handwritten in Latin by someone who seemed to appreciate writing. It reminded him of the last time he had used this language. He could recall the clever conversations he had with security at the embassy, who were trying to figure out who he was and what he wanted. The letter said, "It took us some time to realize that you were using a lost language. We found it funny when we finally translated your clever remarks. It made us see how easily we were tricked. You must have enjoyed those games with words. After we got past our frustration, we had to admire your sense of humor. We won't be caught by surprise again. Please return the same way you came because the unnamed person has shared some information that you should know before meeting him. Thanks to some of the insights he has given us, our security team has begun quiet investigations into some government officials he knows well, as they may not be trustworthy." Wang Ling was impressed. The writer of the letter was skilled and understood that politics can be complicated. The way the letter avoided revealing too much to anyone who didn't understand was clever. He made a note to praise the writer's insight if he ever found out his name. Wang Ling smiled at the message, noticing there was no signature at the end, which kept the writer anonymous. It made sense why there was no return address. If the letter had been intercepted before delivery, anyone reading it might be confused about which government was mentioned. Either way, the situation had changed. Both sides would likely start looking inward to find any leaks. Wong Ling wondered if the writer intended to plant that idea. He put everything back together as if he hadn't opened it. Then, he carefully held the corner of the envelope in the flame of a candle until it began to burn. He watched as it burned until the heat forced him to let go. The ashes fell onto the stone floor of the fireplace, and the remnants continued to burn until nothing was left. He took these steps to ensure there would be no proof of the letter and to remove anything that might transfer information through touch. If anyone asked, he could say the letter might have been delivered but not received. His very presence showed that any attempt to harm him had failed. He needed to think about what he knew and what was still unclear. A question arose. Was this meant to trap him? To be safe, he decided to hold on to this information for a few days, allowing time for things to calm down. If the letter wasn't from the suspected source, someone might be watching him. Therefore, he would act as if nothing had changed while staying alert for anything unusual. Like him, they needed to understand that the American embassy was not completely secure, as some local staff had ties to the Chinese community. This explained why their contact was so careful. The person who sent the letter clearly wanted to keep it secret and took special steps to hide their identity. This showed that the message was important. Later that afternoon, during a martial arts class with new students, he would show them a demonstration with several other teachers. This would help the newcomers see how good their mentors were and earn respect from the older students. It would be interesting to show how easily he could outsmart his opponents, avoiding all their moves. The demonstration would also illustrate how to save energy while wearing down an opponent. He understood that students needed to see many examples to fully appreciate the techniques. As he looked at the audience in the open courtyard, he searched for any new faces. With the visit of the important Six to America coming soon, this demonstration would also prepare an exciting show for the American public. They just needed to finalize their departure date. As usual, details were kept quiet to limit the time for those involved to make other plans. The Communist Party did not like to face public shame, especially when their actions could help others gain freedom. He knew the demonstration needed to be impressive to make China seem strong. He thought about revealing a special move that, as far as he knew, no one outside the group of 6 masters had seen, if they agreed. The performance needed to grab the media's attention to help free his adoptive son's mind. They needed the excitement that had surrounded the first moon landing. He wondered if people would realize it was a simple martial arts move used to confuse opponents, now seen as a dance move. Misdirection should be used so that no one would notice what was really happening. To do this, he would need to arrange a meeting with the 6 masters. Wong Ling remembered the day he first noticed the young foreign child. At that time, he didn't know that an elder monk had been paid to protect the child, as their Chinese guardian was about to be taken by the secret police. It took him about 3 months to learn the whole story. One of the older monks had lost patience with the young child, who wouldn't part with the large Christian cross he wore. The older recruits often debated why he hadn't been asked to remove it. Frustrated by the distraction, one monk had tried to force the child to give it up. For 3 days, in front of the other students, the monk tried to change the boy's mind. Neither the child nor the monk was willing to back down. The boy's refusal to listen surprised everyone around him. Wong Ling admired the child's spirit. This only made the monk angrier. Everyone could see the tears on the boy's cheeks, but he remained silent. Even Wong Ling sensed something was not right. He realized the boy's reactions had tested the elder monk's patience. By the time Wong Ling stepped in, the boy had received tough treatment over the past few days. Knowing the child's strength, Wong Ling made a choice that would change their lives forever. After making sure the elder monk would not hurt the boy again, he took the child aside, hoping to ease his pain. He brought the child into his own space, taking charge of his care and recovery. It took a week of careful attention for the child to start healing. During this time, the boy's innocence touched Wong Ling deeply. Thanks to his knowledge of English, they could talk, and he learned the boy's story. When Wong Ling asked why the boy stayed quiet about his pain, the boy looked up, meeting his gaze with bright blue eyes, and said, "My grandfather taught me that keeping my voice means I am still winning." Wong Ling was surprised to hear such wise words from someone so young. The older monk saw Wong Ling's actions as a challenge to his authority. For a week, Wang Ling stayed close to the boy, knowing tensions were rising. One day after the temple visitors left, the monks gathered. The senior monk wanted Wang Ling to face consequences, suggesting he be asked to leave the monastery. Wang Ling stood firm, arguing that if he hadn't stepped in, the elder monk might have seriously hurt the boy. A serious discussion followed among the adult monks, who recognized the seriousness of the situation. They agreed that the elder monk's actions were wrong. Neither he nor Wang Ling got what they wanted in the end. If the child recovered, they would have a contest of honor. The one who lost would lose their standing. If not, the elder monk could be asked to leave. It took about a month for the 7-year-old boy to start feeling a bit normal again. Wang Ling knew that while the marks on the boy's back would remain, they would fade over time. Until then, the boy felt he could not show his back without bringing attention to the past. Wang Ling was convinced that the boy's spirit was what kept him strong despite the harsh treatment. Around that time, through some connections, he learned that the boy's parents were alive but were held in a difficult work camp. Given its reputation, the chances of them coming out well were low. He decided to keep the child's background private for his own good. Later, the child would find out that his parents had passed away because they would not follow the rules set by those in charge. Once the group felt the child was ready, they arranged a date for a match. Both participants received handmade outfits with masks to wear during the event, making it impossible to tell one monk from the other. The only difference in the outfits was due to their heights. These outfits were eventually displayed in a public place to show off the craftsmanship. Both monks took a vow of silence when they entered the area for the match. Because they looked so similar, those watching the event tried to guess who was who. The older monk was famous for his amazing martial arts skills, while Wang Ling was still building his reputation. For the audience, this match would be a topic of conversation for months, as some moves performed during the match were unlike anything they had ever seen before. The spectators realized how much they still had to learn about martial arts and promised to practice harder. Watching two masters perform together was uncommon. Most of their training occurred in private to keep their skills out of the public eye. Many in the audience were initially shocked at how one seemed to control the match until they began to appreciate the clever tactics involved. Just before the match started, 4 monks were chosen as judges by drawing special tiles from a covered bucket. This process made sure no friendships affected the judging. When the match began, the only sounds were the movements of the fighters and the impact of their strikes. Those lucky enough to be there felt special, and by the end of the season, 3 students decided to join the Order of Monks. The match lasted 3 hours, with breaks to allow the fighters to rest and drink water. Wang Ling was declared the winner when his opponent needed help leaving the area. The older monk had collapsed from tiredness, unable to continue against Wang Ling's last moves. When Wang Ling took off his mask, the crowd gave him a standing ovation. From that moment on, he was recognized as one of the leaders of the monastery. The first thing he said after winning was that the foreign-born boy would now be called Wuming, and he would become the boy's protector. This was decided because the boy was being sought under his real name. When the other monks asked about the cross, Wang Ling explained that the boy had shown he was worthy of it by being willing to protect it at all costs. He declared that Wuming would cease to exist outside the temple because the secret police were after him. Not hearing any disagreement from the other monks, he firmly stated that anyone who did not agree with his choice regarding the child was welcome to leave. From that moment on, the monks turned to him for advice when they faced difficulties. Over time, they grew to trust and respect him for his wisdom. When the head monk decided to step down because of age and health issues, he involved all the monks in choosing his successor. A date was set for the brothers to submit names for the new leader. With the help of 3 chosen students, they counted the names, and Wang Ling was selected as the top choice. Although he hesitated, he accepted the role, knowing he was the youngest to have ever been chosen. When a group of worried individuals learned about his success, they requested a meeting and asked him to bring the foreign child along. He was taken aback by this, as he had been traveling quietly at night with the elder monk he had bested and the child to protect the latter from the outside world. They congratulated him on his unexpected victory over one of their own. The elder monk, acknowledging Wang Ling as his successor, realized that age and health had held him back. He promised to teach Wang Ling so that he could learn special skills when he needed them. During their talk, he admitted that he might have made mistakes before, letting his feelings influence his choices. Wang Ling thoughtfully explained how he believed the child's actions had significantly helped in the elder monk's defeat. He made it clear he thought a protective spirit had been looking after the child, keeping him out of harm's way. Although he couldn't fully explain why he felt this, his words resonated with the others. The older monk saw wisdom in what he said, agreeing that Wang Ling might be right. Throughout this serious discussion, the group started to believe that the spirit had a special purpose for the child. After much talking without Wang Ling, they agreed that the child should be taught the ancient ways as soon as possible. When the monk who had once been bested by the child suggested waiting until the child proved himself, everyone quickly agreed with the decision. Wang Ling was told to teach the child the wisdom of the masters once he had learned it himself. Plans were also made for each member of the group to spend personal time with the child, helping him feel secure as he learned from their different experiences. The group's involvement was important, as each person had a unique way of sharing knowledge. The child was learning in ways he didn't fully see yet. During this time, he began to grasp how the older ones had helped shape their successors. Wang Ling felt very proud of his adopted son's growth. It seemed he was doing his best to use the lessons from his upbringing. The embassy's security staff mentioned that he was applying his basic knowledge to improve his surroundings, just as he had always wanted. It was a lovely surprise that his adopted son had found a way to speed up what usually took time and had turned his ideas into a successful business. With his guidance, the monastery changed from just meeting basic needs to becoming a thriving place of trade. Because of this, the year-end bonuses and allowances had grown every year. The various gardens, beautifully designed to fit the landscape, attracted visitors with their uniqueness. On the mountainside above the public area were tea fields where they grew over 20 kinds of tea for sale. Tourists enjoyed the handmade benches and seating areas made from pottery, stone, cement, and glass, inspired by popular stories. These spaces became favorite spots for pictures, creating memories for guests. They also helped bring in money through donation boxes placed around. However, it was the private gardens, each with a special message, that he treasured most because they were inspired by his endless questions. On Friday, Suling was heading toward Tain after a busy few weeks with the start of school and moving back in with her parents. She admired the mix of fall leaves and evergreens as she drove to her new home. She was surprised to see a new sign off the highway leading to the small village. The valley, surrounded by mountains, reminded her of her childhood, similar to the area where she had grown up. Back then, she didn't value the quiet and distance from the busy world. She was eager to see the new school being built in the district. This time of year was her favorite, especially as the weather was pleasantly warm for late October. She had noticed a big change in her cousin Fen's personality over the past weeks, which was wonderful to see. Fen was opening up and looking at things in new ways. With fewer worries about her father's political views, her once reserved nature was slowly fading, allowing her true self to shine through. Fen felt more confident as she realized that her goals in life were becoming clearer. With her parents' support, she learned about events from her past that she hadn't known before. It seemed her dad only shared important information when necessary. After discovering the role Dirk's parents played and understanding her aunt and uncle's struggles, she started to grasp the seriousness of her own situation more clearly. Fen and Suling talked about Fen's changing views on relationships. It took some time for Suling to see that the men in Fen's life represented very different ideas about the world. She learned that most people have beliefs somewhere in between those extremes. Fen was also starting to feel an attraction to both genders, especially as a fellow student from her community caught her attention. Suling encouraged her to let go of any judgments she had held onto and to embrace her new perspective. This sparked curiosity in her cousin, prompting Suling to explain how her experiences helped her realize that all life is connected. By the end of their meaningful chat, Fen understood that every choice a person makes influences the world around them in some way. Meanwhile, Alana was in Northern California for the weekend with her parents. Her dad wanted to look at some wild horses that the state was auctioning off. Each year, they selected a few wild horses to help ensure their survival through the winter, but this year a second auction was needed due to the high population of wild horses. They had arrived the night before. Alana suggested spending the extended weekend with Dirk to strengthen their bond. It was their first chance to be alone since arriving in America, and she anticipated they would learn more about each other. Alana approved of their exploration together, knowing they could enjoy their time without going too far. They had talked for a few hours about what they expected. Alana gave him the key to their future home just before Suling saw them leave on the plane. That same night, Suling made a copy of the key for herself. With a day off from school, she looked forward to spending time with Dirk and getting her first look at the valley from the future home's location. Suling brought the basic ingredients to prepare some traditional Chinese meals, along with the cooking tools she needed. She had ordered everything from different shops in Pike Place Market in Seattle and had it delivered overnight. Suling was pleasantly surprised to find out that a small batch of dried lily blossoms had arrived that day from China. She was excited to use them in her cooking. When she shared her plans with Alana, Alana encouraged her to learn how to make a few traditional Chinese dishes and pointed out where the cooking tools were stored. Suling knew that making some of these dishes would bring back fond memories for both of them. In a heartfelt moment, Suling's mother passed on some wisdom about connecting with others on a deeper level. Suling was surprised to hear about the lengths her mother had gone to win her father's affection, as it seemed so unlike her. When Suling mentioned this, her mother explained, "We were young and trying to find our paths in life. We tried new things, like all young people do, and it was enjoyable. These playful times helped strengthen our bond, which continues today. When our first child came along, we had to adapt to our new roles and responsibilities. Life is a journey that keeps changing, and we must learn to adjust." Her mother emphasized that their core beliefs remained the same, but they had grown and changed over time. Keeping some things private was their choice. It was no one else's business. With this new understanding, Suling decided to bring some outfits that would catch Dirk's eye. From the moment they met until the end of the evening, Dirk would likely have some mixed feelings to navigate. As her mother had said, the right outfit can say a lot without revealing everything. Alana offered Suling the spare bedroom for the weekend and let her know where to find the sheets and blankets. Before she left, Fen made Suling promise to share everything about her weekend when she returned on Sunday evening. As she drove up the hill to Dirk's home, Suling admired how well Dirk and Alana's house fit into the natural surroundings, resembling a peaceful temple. The home seemed to integrate with the landscape, raising curiosity about why a new dark barn was built in such a bare area. This made Suling think about Dirk's plans for the house he was building and whether it would blend in with nature. When she arrived, Suling left her car running while she unlocked the front door, letting her in to reveal the spacious area inside the cave. After pressing the button on the wall next to the back door, she watched the large doors open. Once her car was out of sight, she began to unpack, making 6 trips back and forth through the back door to bring everything inside. It was now around 3 o'clock, giving Suling time to get ready for the first meal she would cook for the man she hoped would be her future husband. She wished that Dirk would wait until she had everything finished before arriving. After putting everything away, Suling went into the spare bedroom, which she hoped would stay unused. The first thing she did was make the bed. From her suitcase, she took out a light pink dress that she had worked on with her mother for the weekend. The dress was originally designed to hang loosely, but they had made some changes to fit her better. After changing into the dress, she looked in the mirror and styled her hair and put on a little makeup to complete her look. She felt happy with how well she had prepared. The dress looked nice on her. The hem of her dress fell comfortably at her thighs, and when she moved, it flowed gently with her. Thanks to her mother's sewing skills, the dress fit her in a way that showed off her natural shape nicely. She felt good about her appearance, looking soft and welcoming, without giving too much away about her feelings. The light pink fabric added a touch of elegance, and she hoped Dirk would notice her. Her mother had always said that the way she looked could show warmth and charm without going overboard. If she didn't catch Dirk's attention, then it might be hard to do so. Dirk was a serious man who believed in his values. If she wanted to spark his interest, She knew she had to find a way to get his attention. Her mother once told her that attraction could grow over time with the right approach. She put on her makeup to highlight her best features and create a gentle, inviting look. By styling her normally straight hair, she drew focus to her eyes, making her appearance both graceful and engaging. She thought about how, if she had looked like this at school, she would have received lots of attention. It had been so long since she had put so much effort into looking nice for someone special, and she wanted everything to be just right. A short time later, she was downstairs getting ready for the dinner she had planned for them. They would start with a bird's nest soup made with handmade pasta in a seafood broth with mussels, clams, and shrimp. The basket would be woven together when the noodles were halfway cooked and served with the broth poured on top. Just before serving, she added seafood, chives, and some vegetables to finish the dish. Next, there was soy sauce chicken, sautéed greens with stuffed blossoms, and a small bowl of jasmine rice mixed with bits of carrots, red and green peppers, and slices of Granny Smith apple. On the side was a little sauce made from rice vinegar, plum sauce, and pepper to use on the rice if someone wanted. The cool stone floor reminded her of the few times the Wooming had brought her into their private rooms so she could use the bathroom. She hadn't thought much of it then, but now she saw the stone floor as a sign of respect for what nature offered. Time could wear down anything made by people, but nature always found a way to adapt and endure. Taking a break, she went out to the patio to check if the pond was warm enough for a swim. It felt a bit cold, so she knew she would need a moment to adjust. A quick dive would help her get used to the chill. She hoped that as she approached the pond, Dirk would think of their shared moments and feel excited. The polished stone floor of the house reminded her of the temple he grew up in, and she wondered if he designed it that way for comfort. Just before 6, she sent Dirk a text saying she expected him at home. With everything ready, she dimmed the lights, lit some scented candles she had bought, and played romantic instrumental Chinese music from her phone. She then set the table for dinner, confident she had created the perfect mood. The last thing on the table was a pair of bamboo chopsticks her father had made for special occasions. I was reviewing our progress with David before wrapping up for the day when Suling's text came through. I took my phone out while listening to him. Noting the Chinese characters, he asked, "Who would text you like that?" I replied, "Suling. She's letting me know she's at my house waiting. I better head over and see what's up." David chuckled and said, "If I don't see you bright and early, I'll know plans have worked out." I must have looked surprised because he added, "Alana told me not to expect you to focus on work this weekend because they planned for Suling to spend time with you. I guess they want to show you what life might be like with sister wives." It makes me think about how tricky it would be to have two partners trying to balance everything at once. Even with one person, the to-do list is pretty long. "Good recovery, my friend," I laughed. "I know you well enough to guess what you were thinking. I'm not planning to do anything this weekend that would complicate my life even more." "You say that now," David replied, knowing me too well. "But don't be too hard on yourself when life gets busy. You forget that in my life, I've dealt with challenges much tougher than distractions," I said firmly. "Samson had his share of troubles and he was really strong," David said with a teasing look. "All it took was some sweet words and a bit of patience." I expected the girls to be clear about what they wanted, but this took me by surprise. As I drove up the hill, I noticed some lights on, which meant Alana had given her friend a key. I used a remote to open the side doors of the back of the cave and saw Suling's car parked in my usual spot. After parking next to her, I turned off the truck and stepped inside, wondering what would happen next. Part of my worry came from not being able to see how all of this could actually work. Most would think one partner would want the other to leave, yet Alana and Suling were doing the opposite, which confused me. It was also clear that I had grown to care for both of them. Lachey, as his daughter, was driving to meet the man they both hoped would be part of their family. He sat in a cozy coffee shop waiting for his brother. Both he and his wife were hoping this weekend would help Dirk and Suling find a commitment or make a clear choice. He had called for a meeting, so Lachey chose this spot because it was close to their home. Plus, it was a busy place, so they would both be on their best behavior. He wondered if they would talk about finalizing his half of the restaurant. Lachey saw his brother coming to the entrance of the shop. His brother looked like he had aged a lot in a short time, moving slowly as if he carried a heavy load. Lachey understood that his brother must be struggling with the breakdown of his family, as the truth about his situation had finally come out. Fen's mother had told them that she had filed for divorce and asked him to leave their home. It must have been even harder for him with his son suddenly disappearing in those first few days. For someone who needed to be in control, the failures he faced must have felt very heavy. Lachey quietly said to himself, "Good things come to those who wait." As soon as his brother entered the room, he walked over to Lachey's table. When he sat down, he spoke first in Chinese. "Your nephew is in trouble because someone we both know has put him in a tough spot. If what he was told is true and he shared it, they will ask him questions he can't answer because of what it involved. We both know what his home country will do to get any information they can. If you are talking about my adopted grandson, let me be clear. I have never caught him in a lie, nor has anyone I know," Lachey replied in their native language. "He acts out of a strong need to protect his loved ones. Your son's ongoing interest in my daughter has made things worse. His attempts to control his sister's choices crossed a line for Dirk. Disrespecting loved ones is serious. When I found out Dirk was alive, we all knew how he would feel. Don't blame him. Your son was warned but chose to ignore it. I'm not sure what happened, but it looks like I can tell the wombing that his mission was done." Lachey watched as his brother took in what he had said. He spoke with strong belief. "Dirk Blackstone showed me the kind of man he has become when he returned the cross to me. He also made me sure that my choices were right. If he promised to do something because of what others did, you can trust that he would. I'm here to tell you I won't be buying the restaurant. Your sister-in-law wants to run it with you," La Dong said. "This way she can earn money for herself. You will need to work out the details with her. I have my own responsibilities, and I've realized I have no other choice. Once the divorce is done, I will move on, as it seems that those I report to think my time with the group is up. I was so loyal to the system that I couldn't see that once I was no longer effective, I wouldn't be needed anymore. At our age, we are probably too old to start over," Lachey added. "The only question I have is how you were able to find me after we changed our name when we arrived in America," Lachey asked. La Dong replied, "The Chinese Communist Party has people in the Department of Immigration in Washington. Once you were settled, it just took a few clicks on a keyboard to find out what we needed to know. After all, our homeland always wants to know what those causing trouble are up to. I was told to move to the West Coast and connect with you in a way that feels normal and fits our culture. I've always admired you because you are a much better person than I could ever be." With that, Lachey watched his brother get up and say, "Please take care of my ex-wife and daughter as long as you can, as is our tradition, as if I were not here. If my son and I are to have any future, we must be seen as gone, because we both know our government will always try to find us. What I can't understand is why the wombing is so important." Before his passing, his father made a file linking people in China with their representatives here in the U.S., Lachey said softly. "Until that file is found, no one connected to the wombing will find peace." La Dong looked surprised, as if he didn't know what to say. If that file still existed, it could expose their entire government system, shaking the foundation built over many years. The resources spent seemed small compared to what might come to light. Those who could be exposed because of their status were part of the top ranks of Chinese politics. If this became known, it could change everything, waking up a society that had been misled for too long. Lachey watched his brother walk out the door, knowing this might be one of the last times he would see him. Both he and his son were stuck in a situation they created. They would spend the rest of their lives facing the results of their choices, always wondering if today would be the day the Chinese government would find them. As they ran from that government, each day brought uncertainty. Every morning started with the question of whether it would be their last. Meanwhile, Ian and Bonnie Connor were looking at the horses that the state was selling. They had chosen about 14 to 20 young horses they wanted to buy if they could get a good price. They hoped that because it was late in the season, not many people would come to the auction. Alana stood off to the side, busy on the phone, having a deep conversation that had been going on for quite a while. They didn't know she was talking to Fen, who was sharing how excited her cousin was about spending the weekend with Dirk. Fen called because she had just learned from her uncle that her mother would keep her family's part of the restaurant that her father and uncle owned as part of their divorce deal. "You know, Alana feels that we are getting in the way of her and Dirk if they were to get married," Bonnie said. "Even though she doesn't say it directly, she hints at it often. I worry that she might start feeling upset because she thinks we're stopping her from making a choice she might later regret. It makes me rethink their whole situation. With them already having their first home ready, it makes our early plans look silly. How much longer do you think we can keep them from moving forward?" "If you remember, dear, both our parents thought we were rushing things because we were young and excited," Ian said. "They were right, but that didn't stop us from going ahead. Still, I think we were more determined than Alana is. Do you think we're holding her back because of the troubles we faced early on? The nerves made me lose the wedding ring you gave me to hold, which gave us a bit of anxiety on our wedding day. The last thing I wanted to admit was that I had lost it," Bonnie recalled. "After looking everywhere without luck, we had to go on knowing we would arrive late. Luckily, we found out that our flower girl had taken it out of its case and was still wearing it when we got to the car. Pastor Robbins asked if I wanted to delay the wedding because you were about half an hour late, which helped me relax a bit. I told him you were running late but would be there soon. He had doubts about going through with the wedding until I reassured him how much I knew and cared for you. Then, just as I spoke, your father started walking towards the best man to give him your wedding ring," Ian said. "If we think about Alana and Dirk honestly, we have to admit that what they've been through since they met could have ended things for another couple," Bonnie shared. "Instead, it has brought them closer together and taught them important lessons in just a few months, lessons that took us years to learn. That's why I'm struggling to find reasons to keep them apart." "I promised Dirk I wouldn't give our daughter an answer until their issues were resolved," Ian said. "I wish he had shared his true feelings with Alana. It would make things clearer for us. He's doing this out of love because he wants to protect her from worries in a tough situation," Bonnie explained. "He thinks that if anything goes wrong, it would be easier for her to move on. I don't think he realizes that his choices have made that harder. If he were to pass away, our daughter might end up like my great-aunt, who never married again and spent her life remembering the past. Is that really what we want for her?" Ian paused, leaning against the fence. He wanted to look at the situation before saying anything. "To be honest, I think part of the issue is us. Dirk and Alana have shown they can handle life's challenges. They've proven their maturity many times, and maybe we haven't recognized it. The truth is, they are much more mature than we were at their age." Bonnie added, "It really comes down to whether we will sign the papers for them to get married before she turns 18. Are we feeling a little jealous because they have achieved so much and are ahead of many older than them?" Ian looked at her and replied, "Like it or not, it's their life to lead. I think our parents eventually learned to accept this too. Maybe it's time we ease our resistance?" Bonnie fell silent, deep in thought. Although she worried about the timing, she realized if she pushed things without careful thought, she'd always wonder if it was her fault if something went wrong. It might make things easier for everyone and give us time to accept the changes, but the final decision is yours. Are you ready to let go of our daughter? Ian stood there, watching the horses in the field, noticing a mother guiding her young colt towards independence. He began to question if he had agreed to Dirk's request because he was struggling to accept what he couldn't change. Alana had always been a strong, independent young woman who trusted her instincts. From the moment they met, she seemed to know how things would unfold, even if he found it hard to see. He turned to Alana, who was still chatting on the phone with his wife, and asked, "Where do you see yourself in 10 years? "Dad, you know the answer just as well as I do," Alana said. "The only thing I'm unsure about is how many kids we will have." Hearing this made Ian realize that her plans had not changed since Dirk came into their lives. Dirk was the kind of person who showed his feelings through actions rather than words. Ian had never seen anything from Dirk that made him doubt his feelings for Alana. He remembered when she mentioned they would have their moment, clearly believing that they would be okay. Looking at her with warm eyes, he found the courage to say, "If that's Dirk, tell him we will sign the papers that will let you get married. If you can persuade him to go ahead, you can start planning the wedding." Neither of them expected their daughter to shout in happiness, but she did. Dropping the call, she ran into their arms and hugged them tightly. Later, in a quiet moment, Ian asked his wife Bonnie if she thought their daughter could get them to the altar before she turned 18. Her answer showed her strong belief that it was definitely possible. Julie had watched Louis II's plane take off into the night from the airport, heading straight for Seattle, Washington. They had just spent 21 days together in a unique relationship. Louis was ready to start the first part of her new job. Wu Wing had helped her come out of her shell and embrace her new self. By the end of her training, Louis II had formed a deep emotional connection. It seemed she had a strong desire to succeed in her role, which would need some attention to keep her focused in her new surroundings. Before she left, Julie had given her an envelope filled with background information about the people who would be in her new life, and reminded her that they would meet again in 3 months. Sleep came quickly for Louis II after taking a sleeping pill. She woke up to find she had about 2 hours left on the flight. Being in first class gave her some privacy because there were empty seats around her. The other 2 passengers in her section were still sleeping. After a light breakfast and a cup of tea, she opened an envelope to see what was inside. There was a device meant to connect to the laptop she had brought along with another special envelope. Inside that envelope was a note and a small jewelry box, which, when opened, held a delicate diamond pendant shaped like intertwined hearts. Looking at it closely, she saw it was made of 24-karat gold. After putting it on, she read the handwritten note that said, "To my sister who helped me grow, thinking of you always, Ju." The 3 weeks of training had not been physically tiring, but learning about the many sides of U.S. society in such a short time had been mentally tough. She had experienced new joys and wished for those moments to return. She turned on her small laptop, connected the device, and after checking her surroundings, opened the file. The first thing she saw was a newspaper clip about a dance attended by some of the main characters. It included photos of Fen, Suling, Alana, and the Wu Ming. They all looked like they were at a point in their lives where they were starting to find their paths. The 16 pictures gave her enough information that, after looking at them for a moment, she felt sure she would recognize them easily. Julie had been right. She did enjoy the task because she understood why all 3 were attracted to the same charming man. The article pointed out that anything is possible if people can try to let go of their biases, similar to how those at the event appeared to have. She thought that this could happen in make-believe worlds, but in real life, those in charge often had different aims, which could lead to unfortunate results. She knew all too well what could happen when plans didn't go as expected. Next on her list was a 1-hour YouTube special that explained how the Wu Ming had become linked with the political system in the States. She noticed the connection he seemed to have with birds and wondered if he could communicate with them in a special way. The following item was a collection of reports given to the EPA about the project's progress and its advantages. Louis II felt impressed because until she read the report, she, like many in China, thought his work was impossible. The idea that he could clean chemicals from the ground by burning them, even if some traces went into the air, was remarkable. As she continued her research, she realized that she hadn't been told the whole story about the situation she was stepping into. After opening the next file, she began to understand the complexity of her situation. Fen's father and brother had been agents for a long time, but had lost their trustworthiness and were now seen as a risk due to changes in their family ties. A person who cannot manage personal matters is often seen as less useful. It seemed that agents in the field were waiting for permission to be permanently reassigned from their superiors. As she read quietly, she discovered the link between Suling and Fen, along with Suling's new name. She questioned the importance of that name and felt it was worth looking into. Learning that what they had been seeking had once belonged to Wu Ming as a child was unexpected. For someone to give a child something so valuable, they must have had great faith. Thinking back on her previous jobs, she realized that one of the main challenges was that those involved held on to their beliefs strongly. What fascinated her was that, despite many challenges, the person assigned to keep the child safe had managed to help the child vanish before anyone else could step in. They had been forced to witness the sad fate of Wu Ming's parents because those in charge believed it would lead La She to share important information hoping for a better future for himself and his wife. However, according to the report, this only made his determination stronger. She wondered if, had they gained the information they wanted, Lachey would still be alive today. As her time in detention came to an end, the decision was made to send them away from the country. It was believed that he would try to reach out to the child for safety. However, this plan didn't work out. She paused for a moment to understand that the man now called Lachey and La Dong were brothers who ran a Chinese restaurant together. This was important news, but it also made sense. They needed the Dong's help to get the information they required from his brother. She wondered why they had failed before. The big question was, what would happen after La and Li Dong were taken out of the picture, and how it would affect their family. One major question remained: who knew what and when? It was hard to grasp how close they had been to achieving their goal, yet they still fell behind. Her grandfather had once compared China's view of the free world to two half-brothers raised by different families. One wanted friendship, while the other saw the other as an enemy. One acted with peace, while the other behaved as if they were in a winning battle. Just then, the sign to buckle her seatbelt lit up, so she put everything away and got ready for the landing in America. Louis too thought about all the information she had received and realized that they didn't know much about Wuming. Had he really been raised in the Zen temple? If so, had he learned the teachings of the masters? Was there any link between Wuming and Wang Ling? Did he follow the same beliefs as his parents? What skills did he have in martial arts? Most of the information they had was about the people around him, and it was very limited. For now, she would assume Wuming had the same training as she did. To defeat an opponent, one must understand them better than they understand themselves. Once she cleared customs, she stepped outside to find the driver who was there to take her to her new home. The keys to the house and her identification were in the bag she carried. She was surprised to find that among the documents was the green card she had waited years to obtain. They had set up a bank account in her name with $50,000 in it, along with a debit card, driver's license, and other necessary forms of ID. Once her bags were loaded, they set off. She found out that her new home was about a 2-hour drive from the airport, located outside the city. As the driver took her to her new home, she opened her wallet and checked what was inside. Her Washington state driver's license had been given to her 2 months ago, showing her birth date and confirming she was 27 years old. The month and day matched, but the year was different. Her green card showed that she had lived in the USA for more than 4 years. She worked to remember the number on her Social Security card. When she arrived, the driver helped her carry her luggage to the front door. Since she had already paid for the ride, she tipped him before unlocking the door and stepping into her new home for the first time. A place like this would have been unimaginable in her home country, where living spaces were based on need and social standing. Right away, she noticed that the house was larger and more modern than her grandfather's home in China. As she looked around her new place, she felt like she had stepped into a life of comfort. She knew it would take a while to get used to having so much personal space. On the dining room table, she found a folder filled with instructions left by the decorator. It had a list of all the things added to the house. She found it fascinating that there was a device to connect the house to the internet, and if she set up the right security system on the computer in a small office at the back, she could keep her communication with Julie private. This would allow her messages to be harder to track since they would use satellites for the signals. If this was how many people lived in the United States, she understood why some people found it difficult to return home after their time abroad. Out of the 3 bedrooms, she chose the largest one because it had its own bathroom. The quality of the furniture was impressive, and it would certainly make many people back home envious because everything looked top-notch. After unpacking, she decided to see if a car was provided for her. In the area for cars, she discovered an automatic 4-wheel drive Jeep. When she checked the papers, she saw that it was registered in her name and already had insurance and license plates. It was clear the government wanted to make her move as smooth as possible. In the office, she found it simple yet modern. When she opened the desk drawers where her computer was, she found a cell phone already connected to her name and ready to use. She intended to get a second one, thinking this one might be cloned. Remembering Julie's mention of a secret wall in the closet, she returned to the bedroom to search for it. After a short search, she was surprised to uncover another wall behind some items she had noticed earlier. In the hidden room, she discovered a few tools she had used since joining the secret police. They were there for any unexpected situations that might come up. Since it was still early in the day, she thought it would be a good time to go grocery shopping and start making the house feel more lived in. She knew this was important to avoid raising any suspicions. If she had time, she planned to stop by her brother's restaurant to see if she could get any news without drawing attention. Fortunately, she had the rest of the week before she had to start teaching a group of students, a task that made her feel a bit uneasy. After looking at a map, she got ready for her first adventure in the outside world. Hey listeners, if you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.